My name is Arthur Franz. We're here for Table for One, building a competitive paper-based AI. Just a quick show of hands. How many of you are currently designing or in the process of designing a solo AI of your own? All right, that's a healthy number. That's good. So I'm hopeful that what we can bring forward today is just food for thought, right? I wouldn't consider myself an expert, but I certainly have developed several different types of solo AI. What we're going to do today is actually dive in and look at some different types. Just really quickly about me, though, I'm part of Uplink Underground Games, which is the definition of passion project. We're very, very small indie publisher. We are most noted for publishing Breakaway Football and its 11 expansions on the Game Crafter. We have a small but dedicated following of a couple hundred people in our Facebook group. I think we've sold about 1,000 products. It's a nice little community. And one of the things that I have really enjoyed doing is writing. I'm a writer on Meeple Mountain. I've published, I don't know, 6 or 7 articles. I think I have one coming out in a couple of weeks. I've also been on a bunch of different podcasts talking specifically about Breakaway Football and in some aspect solo game design. Lastly, I'm a learning and development manager, so that's my day job. So I hope that you find this, at least this presentation is well put together, because otherwise I probably have to tear a little corner off my diploma. Today's topics, we're going to be exploring what works about solo modes and what to watch out for. We're also going to be talking about 2 basic solo modes that I like to break it down into big buckets. One's called a chaos engine, and the other I call a reactive machine. How many of you are familiar with the term reactive machine from AI development? So that's the technical term in the AI world, and we'll talk about what that is. We're going to offer guidance on creating your own paper-based solo mode, and then we're going to do a case study where we walk through the evolution of Breakaway Football. Don't worry about it, you don't have to know anything about football. But the fun part is there's a version 1, which has been discontinued, which is garbage, don't tell the designer. And then 2 actually works really, really well. So that'll be fun. Okay. So what is a solo mode? Just to kind of level set our expectations, it's a set of additional rules allowing a single player to play a multiplayer board game by themselves. I know there's a lot of debate about semantics where, you know, something is solo and true solo. We're not getting into any of that. If one person sits down to play it, we're going to call that a solo mode, even if they're playing multiple characters at the same time. So here's what effective solo modes can offer. The first thing they do is suspended disbelief. It's almost like when you read a novel or watch a movie and you kind of forget that you're reading. You forget you're sitting in that room and you're enjoying that experience. So you have to feel like you're playing a real person, the bot. And you have the decisions of the bot they're making are plausible and appropriate. So it's easy to conceive of, but believe it, it's hard to accomplish. The second thing is cognitive load and ease of use. You want it to be a simple machine that works elegantly. So the user interface, the UI needs to be easy for the person to interpret. They need to know where to look, right? And where to look when. The input and output needs to be quick and painless. I don't want to feel like I'm doing my taxes when I'm working through. Because remember, we're not trying to model human thought at all. We're trying to get plausible output. So really, is at the smallest amount of in to get the best quality out is what we're looking for. And then lastly, operating the bot does not distract the player from their strategy. It's a lot of work and effort to sort of get that decision, even if it's a high quality decision. I may be frustrated because now I can't focus on what I'm doing, which is trying to play the game and win. Last thing here is what I call sufficient challenge. So the bot's choice needs to not be predictable or easily decoded. And I'm going to show you an example of one that is easy to decode that somebody in this room designed that ended up being suboptimal. And then I'm going to show you how we fixed it. Also, the difficulty can be tuned up or down to match the player's skill level is optional, but I think super important. Because if I'm an expert at a particular game and I get to the point where the solo mode is no longer fun for me because I'm so good at it, because I've played it so much, it would be nice if I could change the difficulty level to maintain that challenge so I can keep coming back to that game over and over again. Before I continue, are there comments, questions, or concerns? Okay, silence is 100% acceptance. We'll go forward. So as far as learning from this, what we're going to want to do is I'm going to ask you to kind of adopt these principles. The first one is to explore what works in designs that you admire. You're probably already doing this, to be honest, but to be really thoughtful about what games work? What games do I really like? What are the ones that I wish my name were on? And let me try to pick them apart and figure out why it works so well. Maybe it's the theme, maybe it's the mechanisms, combination of the two, maybe it's the way it approaches its rulebook, who knows? But let's see what that is. So reading blog posts about the games that you want to emulate, I tend to do a deeper dive on those things. And I'll read through, even if it's a review, I might watch multiple reviewers reviewing a game on YouTube just to see if they come at it slightly differently. I would counsel you, though, be wary of any top 10 articles. You're familiar with these, right? Those are basically advertisements, and while they're not incorrect, it's probably not the kind of information you're looking for. You're really looking for people who are trying to be critical, trying to critique a game, not be critical of it, trying to critique the game and kind of pick it apart and figure out why it works. So seek those out as much as you can. Think critically about what doesn't work in a solo game. It doesn't have to be the one that you hate, right? It doesn't have to be the one that you love, just any solo game. I actually have consolidated my don't list, which is that running list of don'ts. I've consolidated that for our review today, and I'm hopeful that I can duck down below the desk if I say something that gets under somebody's skin. But be fair and honest about where a game underperforms. I try to think really critically about how games function and when something falls short of my expectations, because I don't want to replicate that for you. The last piece here is seek out feedback. So I'm assuming that at least half the room is in the process of designing. Obviously, we have to reach out and get feedback. So finding groups that are focused on solo play can be really helpful. Don't make the mistake that because you are one person and you are smart and you know what you want, that you can just design for you and that will work. That is not a thing, because the world is huge and a lot of people come to these games with different perspectives, and it can be super beneficial to hear what they're thinking. It may line up with what you've got, which is great. It may not, and give you an idea that makes your game even better, and that is also great. So you can definitely control your time and practice that, work that game as much as you can, but please make sure to put it in front of as many other people who are like-minded as possible. I would never give a solo game to my mother, for example. She wouldn't want to play that. But certainly another solo gamer. So I heard someone, who was it, who said they hate Facebook? I'm sure it's half the room. Yeah, there you go. So I am on Facebook, and there is a group specifically for solo gamers. It has 44,000 people in it. That's a really good resource for me because I can lurk in that group and go see what they're talking about. And if I see patterns of thought around some game having sort of a lower than expected fun rate, I'm going to want to dig into that and find out why, because I don't want to sort of feed that into my own design. Okay, so we're going to go through some of my big don'ts, because it's easy to identify what's not working. It's harder to figure out how to make it work. But I think we should go ahead and go through it. The first one is disproportionate randomness. I will call out Arc Nova because I've played that one, but I've heard this also levied against Grand Austria Hotel, where the card draws alone play too great a role in success or failure. So you can imagine, who here, show of hands, has played Arc Nova? Okay, so Arc Nova, you're basically making a zoo, and the cards that come, the like projects that you can take on, the deck is this thick. It is it's like over 200 cards. Might be more like 270, somebody correct me. It's huge. So in that deck, there may be 15 or so cards that I might be going for because I have a strategy where I'm really going to focus on reptiles. If I'm playing in the solo game, I'm only going to get so many opportunities to get cards. There's a good chance that the cards that I need will never show up. So I have to adjust my strategy based on what's available rather than what I want to do. That to me is a disproportionate amount of randomness. There's no telling what's coming out of the deck. Now, how would we address this if we wanted to kind of blunt this effect? Maybe we could have a mechanism where we can go dive into the deck, and I can earn the opportunity to pull a bunch of cards and then choose from those. So there's a lot of ways to solve that, but all we're doing right now is identifying what the issues are. Disproportionate randomness is one. Another one is a closed loop, which is basically there's not enough randomness, and it's a game that is solvable after a few plays. These are possible examples, and again, I'm calling them possible examples because I'm not an expert, and I have never played these two games. But what I've seen in the 44,000 plus people group is that these games get called out for it a lot. So certainly if you want to increase the replayability of your game, you want it to not be a puzzle in that it can be solved. Lastly is unsatisfying victory conditions. This one, to me, beat your own score is not very much fun. But I've seen a lot of back and forth to the contrary. Some people really like it because it kind of gives them an empirical, how well did I do? So, okay, that's fine. I'm not going to die on that hill. But I don't like it because it just showcases that I'm not playing against an opponent. I'm playing against a system, and I don't really want to do that. I want to play against an opponent. There's more. Cognitive load is too great. So this is specifically the amount of detail needed to process to play solo ends up pulling the attention from the human's decision making. So for example, if we've got a multi-handed game where you have to have a certain number of characters in play in order to make the game work. I've heard this levied against Madara. I've never played, but as I understand, you require 4 characters. So if 2 people are playing, then 2 people will carry 2 characters each. If 3 people are playing, 1 person carries 2 and the other 2 have 1 each. But if 1 person's playing, you're controlling all 4 characters. So it's a lot to do. Doesn't mean it's impossible. Doesn't mean it's not fun. Just means it's a lot to do. So you want to be mindful of what you're asking your player to do, and is it too much? And the only way you'll know is by putting it in front of people and asking them, hey, is this too much? And if you get a lot of yes, go back to the drawing board. Another one is if the solo rules themselves are too fiddly. So not that we're asking them to do too much, but that the actual rules are hard to process. This is that whole doing your taxes thing that we were talking about earlier, where it requires too much effort to get the bot's decision. I've heard this levied against Genotype and Kanban EV. Again, 2 games I have not played, but I've heard, you wouldn't believe how many people come and say this. So what that's telling me is that those systems are probably trying really hard to replicate human thought, because that's essentially what that is. These are games that want to be hyper accurate about the decision quality. So kudos to them on that, but the juice might not be worth the squeeze for some people. So that's worth looking at as well. Only one more slide of this, but there are a lot of don'ts. The core game mechanisms are ignored or unused. This is my particular, I didn't see this, but I've seen other people support this, but this is my beef with Terraforming Mars, a game that I've played quite a lot. What I don't like about the solo, and I love this game, I love it, but what I don't like about the solo is that the awards, the milestones, the rival corporations just disappear. And I find that when I try to use the cards, the project cards, that I'm really not incentivized to do so, because in order to fully terraform the planet before generation 14, I have to focus on the standard projects. Does anybody else nod of heads see that as well? It's just unsatisfying. So I can get it done, but it's more of a task and not as much of a game. The fun is in getting the awards, getting the milestones, using the cards, beating other people to the punch. That's the fun. And that's really stripped out of the solo mode. Last one, and this is the last one, is winning solo encourages an oddball strategy. This is easy to spot. So apparently in Sagrada, a game I've played but not played solo. I love Sagrada. My daughter and I play it as often as we can. But in solo, apparently there is a preference that the AI has for dice when they're rolled high or low. So it's always going to grab a certain subset of dice. I think it grabs the low ones. So it makes it hard for the player to score when low dice are prevalent. So you end up incentivizing behavior that wouldn't exist in the real game, just to win the solo game. So again, that's just a reminder that you're playing against the system and not a person, that you have to subvert the rules of the game in order to win. It's super unsatisfying. What questions do you have about this before I go on? Okay, I think we might be back on track. Yes?
Can playing against a system be fun?
Absolutely, and we have several examples of how that works. Yeah. Yes, sir?
Curiosity, I've never played solo versions of board games, and I was wondering if we could raise their hands of how many people do.
There it is. Yeah. So I've got some examples of solo games that you may want to try. Actually, a couple of my favorites are coming up. Let's talk about why we'd want to create a solo mode at all. Thank you for the lead-in. The show of hands shows that enough people are playing it that might necessitate it from a financial standpoint, increasing the marketability and accessibility of your game. It's a good idea. I want to caution you though, please don't tack on a solo mode just so you can put one player, 1 to 5 instead of 2 to 5 on the box. The solo community is fussy. And if you're in it, you know it. They're fussy. They want it to be good. They don't want it an afterthought. And if your game is labeled as, oh, well, that was just tacked on after the fact, it will actually hurt your sales. So if you're going to put a solo mode in, please make it a thoughtful one, because it will pay dividends over time. But just sort of throwing one in, you'll actually get a bad reputation off of it. The other reason might be if you want to create a homemade variant for your favorite multiplayer game, maybe one of the games that I was talking about earlier. You might agree with me and say, heck, I can do a better job than that. Let me just build one myself. I'll put it up on a BGG forum and let other people play it. That's cool too. Whatever you want to do. So let's talk about the types of solo mode. Again, we can go as granular as you want, but I'm staying very high level. We're 30,000 feet today, and we're going to have 2 big buckets, Chaos Engine and a reactive machine, which I'm going to shorten to bot. So what are those? Chaos Engine has no structured thought in its opponent. It's more of an environment that throws obstacles at you to increase difficulty. I'm sure you can think of a few games off the top of your head that do this. I have examples with pretty laborious research to it, so we're going to kind of show you that. But think of a game that just kind of chucks grenades at your head. That's a Chaos Engine. The reactive machine, or the bot, is a true opponent who selects options based on the current game state. So we're going to define game state later, but it's basically what is the state of play at this moment in time. Resources available, position of tokens on the board, all that stuff. And a true opponent, a reactive machine, would need to take some of those things into account before it can choose what to do. So let's go into some examples on that. And as we do, we're going to keep this central question in mind. Does the solo mode need to choose its move as a response to the human player's action? So every game we're looking at, that's the question we're going to keep in our head. Is this a game that requires to know what I've just done, or require to know what the game state is before it can do what it does? All right. If the answer is no, it's a Chaos Engine. If the answer is yes, it is a reactive machine. In a little bit, we're going to talk about how to build both of these. So stay with me. The best way to do that is to explore solo-only games and see how they're built. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to deep dive into 2 of them. This is the structure of a solo game design. You create a stable system with a simple objective. Then you actually add levels of challenge by either adding constraints, threats, complications, or obstacles. And then you can also impose limits on time, movement, action, turns. All of that is in service of the player trying to simply restore or establish order in the system in order to win. So from an academic standpoint, that's all it's doing. It sets up a stable system, it chucks grenades at your head, and then you have to knock them away, prevent them from exploding, keep the system stable. Or take an unstable system and impose order on it. Let's start with an innocuous example, Free Cell. Show of hands, how many people have played Free Cell? Yeah, all right. I played the heck out of this 20 years ago. So we'll just go through this very quickly. As far as a stable system goes, what it wants you to do is stack a 52-card deck by suit in sequence, starting with ace, 2, 3, going all the way up to king. Pretty easy, and imagine if you just had a deck of cards, you kind of splayed them out on the table and started sorting that. That'd be pretty easy, right? Not much of a game, right? So we need to provide some constraints. Let's provide only 4 free cells. So you can't freely move all the cards. You have to move them into these 4 available empty cells. Even that might not create enough constraint to make it fun, so we're going to introduce complications where the random deal to start. So the cards come out in these columns, which means that a number of cards, a high number of cards, are actually covered up. The majority of the cards aren't even available to move. Oh gosh, okay, well now it's getting hard. Then we're going to look at imposing time or limit to your actions. The free cell can only hold 1 card. Okay, well now we have enough bumpers on the bowling alley that we can actually go ahead and play. And again, we're trying to restore order. All we're trying to do is put those 52 cards into the right slots by suit in sequence. As you're designing this, you're going to want to tinker with how much chaos you throw into this system until you get to a win percentage that matches what you want. For the most part, 50 to 65%, but it's totally up to you. I would counsel you not to make that win rate 1 out of 10. that is super frustrating, and players may opt to just chuck it at the wall and go play another game. I would also counsel you not to make this 90%, because that's far too easy and people will just gift it to someone else or leave it at a convention or leave it at a coffee shop. So that 50% seems to be a sweet spot. So now we'll get into some hobby games that do this. Show of hands, how many of you have played Deep Space D6? Me too. I like this game. This is a game that has a stable system that involves a ship board that has different things on it. And what's nice about the game is it comes with, I think, 4 or maybe 5 different ships that do different things. But they all have crew abilities, they have shields, they have hull. So if you just had your board and you were just kind of flying through space with no obstacles, wouldn't be much of a game. So we're going to go ahead and increase the challenge by having random crew activation. So you've got these dice, and you end up rolling them. You see they have colored faces, and one of them is the silver threat die. What that thing does is it actually locks that die, prevents you from being able to use it on crew, and when you get 3 of those, it pulls a threat card into the arena. So you can roll threats on crew dice. You can have regular editions of threat cards, so they're going to come out on a regular anyway. And if I get 3 of these dice, I'll get another card. So it's possible for there to be kind of a cascading effect as this thing goes on. Then once I've got threats out on the board, which is what these little cards are, these are the threats, notice that they have numbers on them. There's one D6 that you roll every turn, and if the number comes up on your threats, then that threat is activated. So just because there's threats out there doesn't mean that they're actually going to do anything to you. Again, that's more randomization. So in this case, we have a 4 and a 4. So if I roll a 4 here, the assault cruiser and the raiders are both going to hit me at the same time. So it's all about mitigating risk is really what it's about, because I'm trying to place my crew dice to eliminate threat cards and basically survive until the big boss. So how does the system make its decisions? Well, we have random card draws of the threats, and we have random die rolls. So what kind of system is this? Is this a chaos engine, or is this a reactive? Yes? Yes. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. Exactly. This is just chucking things at your head and hoping that you can or cannot survive. It doesn't care, and it doesn't need to refer to what you've done before to decide what to do next. Another example is a game called ONIRIM. Show of hands, how many have played that? This is a great game. I recommend getting the app. I've actually never played the physical version of this, but I've played the app about 1,200 times. I love it. In this particular one, you've got these different cards that are colored, let's see, it's tan, green, red, and blue. So there's 4 different colors, and they have 3 different symbols on them, a moon, a sun, and a key. And I won't go through the whole explanation of it, but basically, the challenges are that you have to place these in a certain order in order to unlock a door. There's 8 doors, 2 of each color, and inside the deck of, I think, 70 cards, 74 maybe, there are these 10 shadow cards, and the shadow cards are obstacles that pop up that you have to then clear. You can clear them by either discarding what happens to be in your hand, you can discard 1 key if that's in your hand, or you can just throw away 5 cards on the top of the deck. So this is me playing ONIRIM. One thing that I like is that it kind of shows what happens when a shadow card comes up. And here I have to make a decision. I've got 3 keys in my hand. I'm going to go ahead and burn a key to get rid of that shadow card. Here comes a door, and I have a key for that door, so I'm going to open it. So basically, this is how the game works. And what is happening is the number of available cards is shrinking. The number of threats is shrinking, but I'm also losing cards as I go. So it's possible for me to run out of cards before I've unlocked all 8 doors. If that happens, I lose. Every time I get a door, we get this reshuffling. So I'm constantly randomizing the order of the cards. The only time that I can control that is if I burn a key, which allows me to draw 5, discard 1, which I'm hoping is a shadow card, and then put the other 4 back the way they are. So I'll pause that. Basically, we're going to restore order by minimizing the negative impact of the shadow cards. We're going to use keys to kind of reorder things, and we're going to open doors with the sets or the keys. So here's how the system makes its decision. This is a deck of cards. It's randomized card order. Not only randomized, it's like hyper multi-randomized because I'm shuffling it, probably 6, 7 times a game. So tell me, What kind of opponent is that? Yes? Yes. All right. I like it. That is correct. So that's kind of how solo games seem to work. I struggle to think of one that has an actual opponent. Most of them are you're playing against a system that's just trying to mess with you, and it might do so elegantly. I've got Pandemic up here. How many of you have played Pandemic? Show of hands. Yeah, of course. It's been out a long time. It's one of my favorite games. Although after the actual pandemic, has never made the table. I have the app on my phone. I can't even open it up. Like, I just can't. But essentially, here's what a chaos engine does. Randomized conflict to scale difficulty. The environment is the antagonist. Deck mining and the deck as a clock are very common constraints. And you see that in Pandemic. If you run out of the city cards, you lose. Late game difficulty is throwing more obstacles at the player rather than improving the decision quality. The decision quality doesn't change. It just throws more stuff at your head. And it applies to one player and also multiplayer co-op games. So again, you'd be hard pressed to see any multiplayer co-op games that do anything that a solo exclusive game doesn't already do. Would you like some proof? Let's go through a couple of examples really quickly. So the objective here for Pandemic is to cure all diseases. The stable system is they take 4 actions and draw 2 cards. And if there weren't any disease cubes coming out, you could just run around the board seeing the sights. I want to go to Milan. Milan sounds fun, right? But that's not a game. So we're going to increase the challenge by regular spread of disease. We have outbreaks that actually accelerate that. The deck construction itself is seeded with epidemics that force the disease to propagate. We've got 4 separate diseases to cure, not just one, and it takes 5 cards for each one to solve. Unless you're the scientist. And then the constraints on how the characters share cards. 2 characters have to be in the same city in order to share that city's card, unless you're the researcher. So restoring order, you're removing disease cubes and curing disease. The system makes its decision how? Random card draws. What you pull off of the city deck is completely random. When the epidemics come out is largely random. The way the deck is constructed tries to ensure that multiple epidemics don't stack on top of each other because it really does make the game run away, although it is possible. So what is this? Is it a chaos engine or a reaction machine? I think we all know the answer. It's chaos, baby. Let's look at one more before we move on to the next topic. This is This War of Mine. Show of hands, has anybody played This War of Mine? What do you think of it? Yeah. Yeah, not a great game, but a fun experience. Absolutely, yeah. This is one of my favorite games, but it's brutal. It's tough. People die, not actual people, but characters die in this game. Basically, you're trying to survive in a war zone until the ceasefire occurs. So the system is you take day actions, which consist of, the game board itself is a ruined house that you're trying to make livable. So you try to make it livable. You might try to go meet someone else to kind of join your little band. You eat and drink, you scavenge, and you sleep. The complications, though, are numerous. When you go out at night, you can scavenge to find stuff that you can bring home to help you out for the next day. If you make noise while you scavenge, you may actually bring people to the party, and you don't want people at the party, right? Because they're almost all out for bad things. There are chapter objectives that happen. There's 3 chapters in the game, and each one has a set of conditions that are pretty brutal. So one is you have to collect 5 vegetables and give to these starving people, and if you don't, then you have these soul-crushing fail conditions. And if you succeed, you have a modest bonus of win. That's kind of how the game works. There are tougher cards that are added into the Residence and the Night Raid decks in Chapter 2. Any easy or helpful card is a one-shot only, and it goes away as soon as you use it. The later chapter cards are actually tougher. So basically, the game is trying to grind you to dust. Fun, yeah. But it is. I love it. I have a friend, though, a very good friend of mine, who will not play this game because this is not an experience he wants to have, and I fully respect that. You restore order by mitigating risk day to day at all times and maintaining the character's states, which are fatigue, hunger, wounds, illness, and misery. If your misery gets too high, a character may run away, they may kill themselves. Like it's a serious thing. So how does the system make decisions? There's one black 10-sided die, and there's a bunch of random card draws. Say it with me, folks. What kind of system is this? Oh, I love this crowd. All right. So why should I design a reactive machine? All my favorite games have chaos engines. Art, what are we doing? Well, when chaos undermines the user experience is really the problem. So when you're thinking about your game that you're designing, if the experience you're going for is chucking problems at people and having them dodge and mitigate these chaos factors, then absolutely build a chaos engine. But if you want someone to feel like they're playing against an opponent where the bot needs specific information from my turn to make its choice, that's when a reactive machine matters. When random results are unrealistic or implausible, so if we're avoiding nonsense, that's another reason to build a reactive machine. When the game state, the board layout, the resources, when that matters, that's another reason to build one. Lastly, when my move's intent is a strategic intent that would trigger a reaction from my opponent, that's a really good indicator that I need a reactive machine. When I'm expecting it to react, I need a reactive machine. So if any or all of those are in play, then you're going to want to really build the reactive machine. Art, how do I do that? I'm glad you asked. We're going to go ahead and talk about that now. How are we doing on time? We're looking good. Yeah, we're looking good. So when you're designing a chaos engine, most of the time it's not necessary. It's actually already baked into the game, but we can just take a quick look here at the things you're going to want to take into account. Identify the threats that will destabilize your system. Randomize the threat deployment, so how do they get into play? Scale the threats to increase frequency or power, so when, like, how do I kind of grow that intensity as the game progresses? It might be on a regular timed interval, it might be triggered by events, whatever you choose. And then constrain the player's actions, resources, or time. So when we're designing a reactive machine, it's more. So let's go through the steps. The first one is you're going to want to list all the relative data points that would inform an opponent's decision. Okay, what does that mean, Art? Anything that matters, put it on a list. So if you're thinking about, I'm a person, I'm going to play this game, what's going to inform my decision? What factors, what things do I take into account when I'm deciding what I'm going to do? Make the list. And it can be as big or as small. In fact, I recommend that you make a comprehensive and exhaustive list at this point. So you're going to have a nice laundry list of stuff that matters when you're making your decision. Next thing you're going to want to do is identify major changes to the game state. So I make my move. What does that do to the board? What does that do to available resources? How does it move stuff? Because ultimately what you're looking for is, what about the game state matters? So if I make a move and it only impacts this one corner of the board, well then maybe I only need to focus on that. But if I make this other move and it does more, I need to focus on more. So we have our laundry list of things that inform our decision, and we have another long list of what changes can happen to the game state. Now we're going to step back and go, what does a good move look like? Because what you want to make sure is that we're not designing something that can make a bad decision. And when we get to the example that I'm going to show you, the case study from Breakaway Football, it's really just about eliminating those choices from the subset. If I don't want it to make a bad decision, then I'm going to give it a list of choices that don't include any of the bad ones. So now at this point, we have our nice long list. We're going to assess, and this is the most important word here, exclude the unnecessary data. So we're going to go through and say, okay, we have to have this clarity of thought about what's nice to have and what's need to have. Yeah, I, as a thinking, intelligent person, take these 19 factors into account when I'm making my move. But in order to get a plausible output, how many of them are absolutely essential? Well, these 3. The others are nice, the others help, they matter, but these 3 are the ones that are most important. Because again, the machine you're building has to be operated by a person who just wants to play their game. So you want to have as few of those as possible, few levers to pull as possible in the final. Next, you're going to program strategies into the tool. So what you'll probably see is that if-then, a lot of if-then statements. Well, you know, if the board looks like this, I'm going to want to do this. Ah, but if this, then I'm going to want to do this other thing. That's great. I mean, that's the whole point of games. Those are going to filter out into strategies. And what you're going to want to do is kind of figure out how many different strategies are you going to allow the bot to take on. Lastly, encode the tool. I can't stress this enough. The output can't be predictable to the user. So you may have an engine that spits out plausible goodness with no problems, but if I can look at it and tell what it's likely to do, that's a significant error, a significant problem. Because I don't want to be able to, it would be almost like I'm looking across the table at my opponent and they're telling me what they're about to do on their move. I mean, it's like that. So it's very unsatisfying. Okay, so I have some examples of how to do this that we're going to get to. But before I do that, does anybody have any basic questions before we continue?
What's the difference between encoding the tool and throwing it in?
Yeah, so I'm going to get into that. Encoding the tool is really about hiding the choice from obvious inspection. If I'm going to, let's take football, because that's what we're going to do. If I'm going to throw a pass, I don't want you to be able to look at the tool and say, oh, he's going to throw. I want to see, you know, some gobbledygook, some encoding that doesn't tell me what he's going to do. And then when I work the tool and flip the card over, oh, he's passing, right? So that's what encoding is. It's really hiding from obvious view what the tool's going to do. Yes?
Yeah, I was going to comment in a very similar way. Like some of the giving an idea to the user, to the player, what is going to happen can be just a puzzle. It's just a different kind of game. It's not so much.
Right.
It's not strictly bad, I guess.
No. None of this is bad. It's just if you want to have someone have the experience of playing against an opponent and not solving a puzzle, those are two different experiences. Yep. Right. Yes?
What about a game like Blackjack where it's reacting to its own bot hand and not reacting to the player's hand? Does that still fall into this category?
Well, I guess the rules of blackjack, there's certain optimal plays when the dealer is showing whatever, and so you can kind of have that already coded in. So I don't know that like if the dealer could choose which card they were going to put down, that would be necessitating kind of a reactive machine. But otherwise, you're just setting up kind of the rules, if this, then this, and there's no real thought there. It's just like, okay, well, you presented 14, so I'll double down, or like, what? I don't play blackjack, whatever it is. Do you double down on 14? Like, I really don't know. Okay, I just showed my weakness. There it is. So let's do the case study. This is Breakaway Football. This is my baby. Hi. So again, you don't have to know anything about football. The whole point of this game, it's an American football game. We wanted to create something that had strategic depth, but didn't make you focus on individual players, didn't make you sit at the table for 3.5 hours. So this game takes 90 minutes to play, and when you play it solo, the old way, it only took you 60, but now it takes you 90. This is the solo board. The player calls go there. That's an example of a card. The orange is a run and the blue is a pass. There's a single digit there in the corner. That's the value of the card. And so essentially what you do is you compare the offensive and defensive values. You do some simple subtraction. So if I've got a run of 3 against a defense of 2, I'm going to gain 1, and that means I would move my ball marker on the field. So that's essentially how it works. It's more detailed than that because of the play types. There's 10 different play types on offense, and some of them create what are called breakaways. See what we did there? And that has the potential for a big play. A breakaway on defense is a sack or an interception. A breakaway on offense is a huge play. Again, we're not going to get into any of that. I just want to show you how the AI makes its choice. Each team that we have is based on an iconic single season from pro football. This one is, can anybody tell me who this is based on? Yeah, that's the Pittsburgh Steelers. They're called the BLACKSMITHS in our league. This is the '78 Steelers that won Super Bowl 14. And then this is the HORSEMEN. Can anybody tell me who that's based on? That's the Dallas Cowboys. So they're from 78 as well, yeah. So anyway, they all have different skills and abilities, and it's a super fun game. I'm biased, but it doesn't make it untrue. It's a super fun game. This is basically how it works. So when you're playing as a solo, the offense always puts their card down first on the board, and then the defense actually has to consider what the offensive card is showing them, because there's a little bit of imperfect information there, and then the defense will place their card. So essentially what we're trying to do Since the human is placing the card for offense, we need the defense to be thoughtful. And we're going to look at it from both sides. We're going to look at how the bot chooses the offensive card and how the bot chooses its defensive card. The imperfect information that's provided is you have to know what the formations reference, run heavy, balanced, or pass heavy. So the blacksmiths only have a run heavy and a balanced formation, whereas the horsemen actually have all three, run heavy, balanced, and pass heavy. So we use this in the AI. So here's the challenge on offense. This was our version 1, and we have discontinued this. So I made sure to put that. This is not how it works now. This is how it worked before. And the way it was, we said, well, gosh, I guess we'll just pull it random, right? So we introduced a chaos engine into something that requires a reactive machine. So you see immediately, before I even tell you how it worked, it's not going to work, right? Okay. So essentially what we did was a random card, and so we said, well shoot, I can already see what the card is on top, so I'm going to tell them to burn a card. So they're going to move that card over there, and then they're going to take the one that's second. Aha, I gamed the system out. Nope, still the same problem. Overall, we can still get situationally bad calls. This close formation is their run heavy. If they're in a 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6, they have a mile to go, and they pull some run that's not going to get them anywhere close to it. That is an implausible call, and that is not satisfying for the learner, or for the user, the learner. So this is version 2, which is much better. This is actually a series of charts that are easy to use. So this offensive chart is based on its deck construction. Each team is different. So every team has 15 cards for offense because the cards are the clock. You have 15 minutes per quarter. You discard a card each time you use it, and that keeps the clock right. So everybody has 15 cards, but what's on those cards is very different. How many runs, how many passes, what the values are, what the play types are, which 2 plays are on the same card, because you saw it was 2 plays per card. So the strategy of the team is reflected in the AI without changing the way that the AI works. So you can pick up any of the 38 teams that we've published, and the AI for all of them is identical in the way that the user interfaces with it. But what it's doing is tuned to that team, and so it is very much a custom, this is what this team does well. So the game state is captured right here to help narrow the play calls, and the randomness is actually cycled within strategies. So these, apologies for anybody who's colorblind, this is green 18, blue 80, and red 98. Those different columns represent different strategies. Think of it simply like this. Many of the earlier teams, the green is conservative, the blue is balanced, and the red is aggressive. But for some of the later teams where that doesn't really work, it might be, okay, the green is they're just trying to get 1 yard line. The blue is their trick plays. The red is their highest value stuff. Like, you can mix and match the strategies based on what the team does well without changing the user interface. So people can come to the tool and play it the same way, but get a different result because the tool is tuned to the team's strengths and it's trying to make the team function the best that it can. Does that make sense? So here's how this works. It's actually a front and a back. So on the front, you've got the coding that you had referenced earlier. Thank you for asking. This is the coding, and on the back is the actual play call. So here's how it works. Step 1, you choose the formation. So remember, this is the bot choosing its own formation. So the bot here is on offense. We're going to roll 1 6-sided die, and we're going to correlate that to where we are on the chart. Let's say it's 1st down and 4 to go. So we're going to look down here, 1st down column. Distance is 4. So we're rolling here. We roll, we get a 5, and so that tells us they're in pro set. Super. I'm going to go grab any pro set card and put it on the board just to remind myself what that formation is. The AI is making a smart choice here because I have tuned what formation it's going to choose based on how far it has to go to its next milestone, which is the 1st down or the end zone. And so as you can see, 3rd and 5, which is kind of a longer yardage, it's only going to call pro set. But here in the shorter yardage, 1st and 1 or 2, it's leading more on its close formation, which is the run heavy. That makes sense for this team because they are a run heavy team to begin with, and they want to run as much as they can anyway. So that's how the decision space or the strategy is actually encoded into the tool, but the person using the tool doesn't have to think about that at all. They roll a die and they look, oh, pro set, cool, they grab that. The next thing you'll see is the game state. What I've done here is I've figured out what are all of those things that might inform the decision. Certainly the down and distance is important, but also, am I winning or losing? What are the trends or tendencies my opponent has had in the past? What are they likely to call here based on, the paper can't think like that. So I looked at all of the things that I would take into account, and I had to have that scalpel precision and that pain of going, this is important to me, but I can't include it. Important to me, but I can't include it. Because fundamentally, I still get a very high quality decision if I just look at down and distance. So I came up with a very clean way to express down and distance. You add them together. So this is first down and 4 lines to go. I'm at the 30, I'm trying to get to the 50 because that's where my first down is. 1 plus 4 is 5, so I'm in red 98. So then I know what column I'm rolling on. So I know what formation I'm in because I put that card on the board, and I know what column I'm rolling in because of the game state. Now I roll 1d6 again. So I've rolled a die, put a card on the board, and I'm going to roll a die again, and I get a 5. That 5 is Mike Dragon. That is nonsense. It doesn't mean anything until I flip it over and take a look on the back. This is a code for what that play call is going to be. Now, I'll share this with you. When I was designing this, I was watching videos on the Enigma machine. How many of you know about the Enigma machine from World War II? Super, super impressive. I just wanted to get inspired about, like, how do you encode things in a way that isn't impenetrable but looks impenetrable? And so I came up with this way. Here on the back, you have another correlation here. You've got Dragon, Joker, and Razor, Gold, Jet, Mike, and Smoke. So that's how you can find one of the 16 locations. I can code 16 plays in each formation. And I make sure that whatever Gold Joker is in one formation, it is not the same thing in another formation. So if I've got 3 different formations, and I make sure that that 16 is giving me different output, then I've got 16 times 3 is 48. I try not to do math in front of people. But yes, so I've got a lot of different options, which means that if the player is trying to sort of decode or deconstruct my thinking, they've got to remember a lot of stuff. They might be able to do it, but it's not worth the effort, 100%. So it helps them suspend disbelief. It helps them just sort of sit back and go, all right, I got this. I'm just going to focus on what I'm doing because I trust the tool is going to give me a good output. So we look at what Mike Dragon is, and it's this special run value of 3. Now you can go get the card and put it on the board if you want, or you can just play it off the sheet either way. The cards are fun, but it does add time. And that's basically how you find the call. Now, we broke it down, and it took me about 5 minutes or so to explain this to you, but in practice, it only takes about 10 or 15 seconds to get a play call. So I can just roll, pull, roll, look, and then I have what I need. So here was the challenge that we had on defense. So that's the bot making its decision on offense, which has gotten a lot of praise. This was the original defense. And again, I just want to call your attention to the fact that this is discontinued. These don't exist anymore because they're not good. I will open myself up to critique. Can anybody tell me why this is no good? Go, please. Very quick on the draw. Go ahead.
It's a chaos engine because it uses the dice roll.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, there is some thought here, but I agree with you that there's not enough decision-making at play. The way this works is that it's a dice pool that grows based on the formation that the offense called. So it is using information. Technically, it's a reactive machine, but it's a terrible one because it's relying on the dice pool. So if I put up a balanced formation, you're going to roll 2 dice. But if I put up a balanced formation and I happen to be 4 or more lines to go, then I'm going to add a die. You can see how this isn't difficult, but it becomes a little cognitively cumbersome because I'm like, well, wait a minute, how many dice am I supposed to have? And then I finally figure out how many dice I'm supposed to have, which again pulls me out of what I want to be doing, which is thinking about my strategy, pretending this is a real person and trying to outsmart them. No, instead I'm building a die pool. It's also a problem because it is different from the way that the offense works. Either version 1 or version 2, it doesn't match either one of them. So that increases the cognitive load. The other main problem is that the range of the die, when I first designed it, I'm like, this is great, but it's not, because the range doesn't create enough difference. When you add, well, 1 die is going to be 1 through 6, 2 dice is going to be 2 through 12, but when you add that 3rd die, it basically takes this 6, 7, 8, and it basically expands it to about that, 5 to 10. Like, so you still get a cluster of the most likely play calls in the same general area. The things down here, some of which are the most powerful pass defenses, hardly ever get called. So again, it's creating that implausibility. Well, why don't you just change it, Art? Okay, so I did. In the interest of time, we're not going to go through this. But one thing I want to point out is that we've included the instructions of how to use this on the job aid. That's the one thing I wish that we had done a couple of years ago with the offensive AI that I just showed you. It doesn't have the instructions on how to use it on the sheet. There's a solo rule book you can read. It's easy to use. Once you do it a couple of times, it's fine. But you know how it is when you put a game away and then you come back to it a year later and you're like, how does this work again? And you got to relearn it. This way, at least, it's showing you how to operate it. And it's the same thing. This is your game state, which is figured out the same way, down plus distance. And this is the opponent's formation, run heavy, balance, and pass heavy. Roll 1 die. And then you'll flip over here and you'll roll another die and it'll give you the call. So it's the same activity for offense or defense. Roll a die, pull a card, roll a die, get a play. Yes?
Okay, this has been bugging me. Does anybody, when they're playing, hold up that card over their face like they do in real NFL games? It's like I'm looking at that and that's entirely what I do. Like at first I was overwhelmed by it, but now I'm like, it looks like the call sheets that they have.
Yeah, and that was the intent. We wanted it to visually look like something that would be on a sideline. That's why the color scheme looks like that with big blocks and whatnot. No, but this is a solo game, so you can do it. So if you want to do that, it's on. Yeah. No, I love that. Okay, so that's that. So let's just take a quick look at the features and successes of a reactive machine. First, you can embed strategy. So that's the way that you get better decision quality in our offense and our defense. Actually, let me back up real quick. These on the back of this, where we have eagle, stunt, and twist, that was our way of expressing, green 18, blue 80, red 98. So we have 3 distinct strategies. One's conservative, one's aggressive, and one is trying to generate breakaways on defense. That's the 3 kind of modalities that can be taken on. So embedding a strategy in your tool without it being obvious is a really important success of this. And encoding the action, so making sure that a user can't glance at the page and have an idea of what's likely to come. That's really not a thing here. Improving the choice, so basically limiting the bad choices and improving the opportunity for the good choices to come out, and that's where those strategies come in. Simplifying the decision. And lastly, including the steps. Like I said, that's something I wish we had done for the offense, but on the defense we have it. So that way the replayability is higher because it's easy, the barrier to entry is lower. So just to kind of recap what we've talked about before we open this up for discussion, we did explore what works about solo modes and what to look out for. We actually spent quite a bit of time on what to look out for. We did talk about chaos engines and reactive machines. I hope we have a better understanding of those 2 kind of big bucket items. I did offer some guidance on how to create your own paper-based AI. And then lastly, we kind of went through the case study for breakaway football. So with that, I'll kind of open it up for discussion for the remainder of our time. Before we start though, real quick, if you want to get in touch with me, uplink undergroundgames at cox.net, easiest way to do that. I'm available for any discussions at all. Okay, yes? I haven't, but that doesn't mean that they don't exist. I mean, essentially a reactive machine needs to have input from a user in order to make its decision, but like within that, there is randomization. So I like to think of the randomization that's in the example I just showed you as not chaos. The chaos engine is, I don't care what you do, I'm just gonna chuck stuff at you. So I see them as very separate. But there is randomization in all of these games. It's just how is it applied. Yes?
Okay, so in your tuning of kind of your paper-based AI, right? It looks like if we were to get any more complicated, it would probably start shedding users. Did you play with that? Like how, make it more complicated or less? Or is it just kind of
We wanted to make it bone simple, so I wouldn't want to make it any more complicated than it is. And actually, it isn't complicated, it is intricate. But it isn't complicated because you just roll a die, look, and you're done. The target audience that we have is accustomed to doing a lot of math. And so this actually makes the game more accessible for our target audience, because before, when it was obvious that there was no real thought in it, they thought it was an arcade game. And they're like, I'm not playing that. That clearly, because there's no statistics, there's no specific players, the team names aren't right, why would I play that? And it's like, but it's based on the statistics, the numbers are, like, it's supposed to feel like the team. And so when we get somebody to play it with an open mind, they go, my God, that felt like that team from my youth, right? Because that's a lot of our players are folks who are probably able to play more board games now because they're in retirement or approaching retirement, or people like me, I'm almost 50. And I grew up with certain football games that I kind of wanted to recreate, but with modern mechanisms. So for me, this is like resurrecting my childhood. I love it. Yeah. Yes?
So this game is kind of reacting to, the other players' decisions. One design I'm working on, you're kind of each building your tableau and trying to meet your objectives. Is there any different considerations? Because they're really not making too many decisions on necessarily my tableau, but they really want to optimize a decision based on yours. Are there any things that kind of play different to that?
So would you have the AI create its own tableau while you're sort of doing your own thing? Yeah, so I think trying to model human thought in that arena would basically mean that I'm playing both of them. So what you're going to want to do is figure out a way to just get plausible output rather than have any real sort of strategic thinking. So you may want to put together some predetermined puzzles that people kind of work against. That might be a good thing. Or you may want to randomize issues or challenges that come out that affect only my tableau. But no, if you're going to have them build the second one and work on their first one, that might be too much. Yes?
I'm working on a game that's got a reactive bot, but it's a multiplayer game, so it's cooperative. Have you seen any differences in how you do a reactive bot for a multiplayer game than a solo mode?
So where does the human's decision change the decision of the bot? Let's start there. And if you don't know, like, I'm not putting you on the spot. That's the first thing to think about.
I mean, it's a game of cats and dogs and mice, right?
Yay! All right, I want to see it. Do you have it here?
The dogs chase the cats are going after mice, which have targets, right? So the characters are moving around the board based on their different targets.
Yeah.
And that changes every time you as a player move your cat.
So is the
So the dog and the mice are what I would call the reactive bots.
Okay.
But I'm not sure. I've been wondering if they're actually a chaos engine. They're somewhere in the middle.
it sounds like a chaos engine, because it sounds like what's going to happen is if the target moves, then the dog's going to follow it.
Yeah.
Right? And so my decision or my move doesn't change the dog's thinking. It's still going to run after the thing that it wants to go get.
Yeah.
So
Because that thing is you.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what it's running after. Yeah.
That might be a really good opportunity to do both, where one of them is the chaos and the other one follows rules.
Try it out. Like I said, I don't speak, from a position of supreme knowledge. This is just how I understand it, and I wanted to break it down into big buckets so we could have good discussions about it. Yes?
So when you say reactive, though, it's meant to be reactive to the players or reactive to the environment?
Reactive to the player, yeah. Because the environment's going to do what it does. Like, think of it this way. I can't make it rain, and I can't stop it from raining. So if my game has rain, super, it's going to rain. But if I'm Zeus and I can decide to make it rain, and then that changes my opponent's decision, that's reactive bot.
Let's talk about terminology. You keep calling them bots.
Yes.
A lot of games call them automas, or I've heard 6 different terms. Why do you use bots, and do you use it in your game?
So 2 reasons. One, the automa, I think, is a term that is specific to a company. It's almost like calling a tissue a Kleenex or a photocopy a Xerox. So I don't use automa because I think that is specific to a particular company, the one that does viticulture, Gaia Project. Thank you. Yeah, those whatever company they hire. Yeah. So that's why I don't use the term. And I've heard the gentleman who runs that company uses the term bot. So I'm like, well, that's not copyright. I'll just use bot. So I've heard, I just want to use one term so that we can all kind of have that same vernacular. But it's just an easy way to express the thing that's making the decision that isn't me. How are we on time?
We're over.
Oh, we're over. I'm sorry. Okay, let me shut this down. I apologize. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. Feel free to reach out to me, and thank you.